All right. I think we're live. Let me just double check. I think that was my stomach. Uh, Too much coffee. All right. So today I'm actually not going to build a whole lot. I might assemble some things, but I thought we would take a look at a project that I've kind of been working on and picking at and adding to kind of since I started at Rive. First with the character and then adding a scene to it. And it's just always kind of been a fun project to go back to and test new features. So I thought today, let me go ahead and get myself out of the way. Um, we'll do this for now. Whoops. Okay, that'll work for now, but I'll probably hide myself. So we're going to take a look at this project here. So this is a character that I have animated and set up. It's got a walk cycle and then this idle animation as well. So I thought what we'd do today is kind of show you how to assemble a scene um, using this character and then a few different background elements. A background element here, which is just a looping, like tiled grayscale photo that I found and kind of manipulated to get it to loop correctly. And then we've got this tree, which you can see is just passing, it'll pass in the foreground. So what we're going to do is try and assemble this and then hook up a way to like pause to play, stop, and reverse the direction the character can move. So let's first take a look at our lumberjack here. So for this one, we're actually, I had mentioned using events, but I don't think I'm going to need to use them in this case. I think what I can do is just key some nested inputs from this artboard. So yeah, we're going to jump in. And if you have any questions, just let me know. I'll get out of the way so that I'm not hiding all of the animations. Hey, everybody. Hey, Jeff, Rara, Nino. Good to see you. Yeah, feel free to drop any questions you have as I'm working. It could be related to this. It could be, something else that's not necessarily related to this project. But yeah, I'll be trying to check the comments and questions, and maybe as we go, I can try and field some of those. So let's get started and let's start walking through what we've got here. So if we take a look at our character artboard, so like I said, we've got this walk Boolean, and basically when it's true, he starts walking, and when it's false, he goes back to the idle state. And one thing to note is when I click on this input, you can see over here, we've got this exposed to parent artboard. And so that's something we want to keep in mind, that we've got that checked, because we're going to want access to this Boolean on our other artboard. So let's go to our main artboard. And this is, right now I've just got this noise texture to kind of add some grain over top of the project. And I'm going to go ahead and lock that so I don't mess with it. And let me get out of the way. And we'll go ahead and walk through how I would set this up in a way to allow you to play and then pause and go, flip the other direction. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm actually going to get rid of a lot of this stuff so we can kind of build it from the ground up, because I think that would be pretty useful to see. And again, this is something I'd love some feedback too. If this is something that doesn't quite make sense, or it's, maybe it's too beginner and you'd rather just see how the state machine is set up, in future videos, we can go ahead and we can fix that. But I'm going to go ahead and just delete all of these animations, and I'm going to add a new one. We're going to delete this layer. We'll just remove all the inputs. So we're starting kind of from a clean slate here. So the first thing I want to do is get our main background in and looping. So I'm going to grab this. So this background, I'm going to go into my main and I'm going to add a nested artboard. Then I'm going to select my background artboard, and we'll go ahead and center it up. And then over here, I'm going to add the background loop as a simple animation. And the reason I'm doing this is because I want access to this speed here. So this is what's going to allow us to play, pause, and then reverse the animation. So I'm going to actually click check playing, and I might revisit this after I get this set up. I might revisit maybe another way you could handle this. But for now, I'm going to set the speed to 1. And when we go ahead and play this, you can see we've just got our looping, our nested artboard is looping. So now in our timeline, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create 3 different timelines or states that'll be our forward animation, our stop animation, and then our backwards, or so our left, right, and then stop. So we'll just name this one background forward. Okay. And then we're going to click on this, the nested artboard. We're going to set our speed to 1x and then just key that. So now let me pull our background behind our noise. So now, as you would expect, we need to make sure this is looping, but as you would expect, our background's gonna loop. It was just playing that timeline, straightforward, basically. Then what we can do is duplicate this, and we'll say background. We'll call this one pause, maybe. And then in our speed, we're just going to set that to 0. And so now what would you expect? That it's not going to play at all because our speed is set to 0. And then we can duplicate this one more time, and we'll call this background backward. Okay. And we're going to set the speed to -1. And now when I play this, you can see the background's moving in the opposite direction, or it's moving in reverse. So that's the kind of main setup of what we need to get the background working. So let's take a look at our state machine. And what we're going to want to do is set up I'm going to do this in a way that everything can be like we can interact with all this on the stage if we want to, or on the artboard. So the first thing I'm going to do is we're going to create a Boolean that's basically just play pause. So we'll say maybe is playing. Okay. And over here, we're going to start. Again, we might try this one way, and then we'll go back. And if I have time, we might see how you would set it up in another way. But this is the way I've kind of found works the best for me. There is the option to do in any state, but I found there's some issues that you run into, but maybe we can address that if there's time. So I think to start, we're just going to start with our background pause. And let's get these out of the way. And so when we play this, you shouldn't see any movement. What we want now is to pull our background forward. And we're going to say, when is playing is true, we want to start our walk, or start our background movement. So over here, we'll set our condition to is playing is true. And so now we can toggle this on. And then when we toggle the is playing off, I know this sounds very basic, but it'll help when we kind of set everything up with the character as well. We want to go from our background forward state back to our pause state. And here we're just going to add another condition that looks for if is playing is false. And we can go ahead and start and then stop. Okay. So that's our basic movement, our forward movement. Now let's pull our backward timeline on here. And we're going to connect our background pause to, we're actually going to go, we need to, looking at this now, what we need is another Boolean that's going to say essentially is the character flipped. So we'll go ahead and add another Boolean, and we'll just call it is flipped. Okay. So basically, if we're playing in our forward state, okay, so we're playing, we want to check for if is flipped, we want to go ahead and go from forward to backward. So we're just going to create a transition here, and we're going to add a condition that checks for if is flipped is true, we're going to go backward. So now we start playing, and then we click, you can see our scene's going to bounce and start going the other way. And now what we can do is we can bounce back and forward between these two. So now, if is flipped is false, then we'll go back to forward. So now we can play our scene, and then we can go back and forth. Okay. Now the last thing we need to do is we need to check. So if we're going backward, we still need a way to pause the scene. So we're going to go from our backward state over to our pause state. We're just going to say condition if is playing is false. We're going to go back to pause. And one thing we can do is, let's say we haven't started our state machine, but we've checked our is flipped to true before we start it. We need a way to go to our backward or reverse animation so that it actually starts running and we don't get some. Right now, nothing should happen, right? The reason this is kind of goofy is because that might actually, I know why, because there's no condition. So it's just going to check, it's going to go right to backwards. So we want to check and make sure that we're handling that correctly. So we're going to go from our background pause here, and we're going to say condition. So we're going to say if is playing is true, and then if is flipped is true, we're going to go to our backward state here. So now if we go ahead and run this, start, stop, we'll check off is flipped. Now we should be going forward, and then stop, and then we can flip back and forth here. So that's kind of the basic loop, checking all these conditions and just getting our scene working, moving forward and back. What are the challenges with using the any state? Well, so that's one thing I want to try if I get time. So the issue I ran into is I'm going to add some duration on each of these transitions. And what seemed to happen with the any state is every time I'd start the scene, there was kind of an odd jump when I was at pause because there's a transition there. So there might be a way to add maybe another dummy state that it defaults to, and then you can go to your forward and back, or you just remove the duration off of the pause, which could work too. I'm just gonna, again, I think we'll have time, and we might just dive in and try and set up a new state machine using the any state. Excuse me. So here I'm going to select all these. I'm going to add maybe 250 millisecond duration, and then just do some basic interpolation. So now when we play this, you can see we're going to get a little ease, which is going to help because our character is going to slow down too. And then when you flip, get a little bit of easing. And if I increase that between let's see what this does here. You can see you get a little bit more. It's not a ton, but it definitely helps with that transition in between the two directions. Okay, so that's our background. Now what we want to do is we want to add our character in here. Yeah, no problem, Jeff. Again, I know that I think Mr. Beardo actually shared a version where he was using any state to move forward and backwards. His was a little different in that he had hard stops, so it would jump to the end or exit. This one, you can stop it and start it wherever in the animation. But yeah, I think we'll hopefully get a chance to take a look at using those, the any state, to try and set this up. And again, it could be a better solution. So we'll learn together today. I haven't gotten a chance to kind of mess with the issues I was having. All right. So let's name these, name this background. Now we're going to go ahead and add our lumberjack to our main scene. And we're just going to add we'll go into design mode here. We'll add another nested artboard and we'll select our lumberjack. And I do believe I wanted to have him scaled a little bit, just a little bit bigger. And then we're going to group the lumberjack because we're going to flip him, and I want to adjust the pivot of his origin here to the point where I think it might be here. Let's see, when we play this, I think that'll work. Okay, we'll mess with it later, but let's go ahead and name this character. And we'll pull this back behind our noise layer too, so he gets the noisy treatment. So you notice once I dropped that artboard into this main scene, we got this nested artboard flyout, and we've got our walk Boolean right there. So this is awesome because we can utilize that. So if we go take a look at our character over in the inspector properties panel over here. So you see our state machine here. And when I click this, I think we need to be in an animation. So you can see we now have access to that walk Boolean, and we can actually key that on a timeline. So now if let's think about this. So now every time we want him to walk, we want to click that walk animation or toggle that walk animation on. So in our forward animation, we can just go ahead and click and go ahead and key the walk animation to true, or the Boolean to true. And we probably want to do the same for our backward. And for pause, we're going to key it, but we're going to key that Boolean, or we're not going to have it checked. We're going to have it set to false. So now when we play our state machine here, what should happen is when I click on is playing, our character starts walking. And then when I set it to false, he stops. So, I mean, this already is pretty cool in that you can sync up a character walk cycle to a background, a scrolling background. So one thing that I think is really cool is to watch. You can see the nested Boolean, toggling on and off as it's being triggered in those different animations. So that's pretty basic. What can we do next? Well, we want our character to flip. So here what we want to do is, let's see, how could we do this? We can try setting this up. I think we need to do a new layer, and we'll call this character direction. And we'll default to forward. Whoops. I actually need a new timeline. I'll say that character forward. And for this, we're just going to key our scale on X, just to 100. And then we're going to duplicate that. Ooh, I totally spelled that with an extra E. Character forward. And then here we're going to go character backward. I have a new keyboard and it's given me a weird ASCII character every now and then. So here we want the character scale to be -100. Cool. So he's flipped. And then now for our character direction, we'll start with our character forward. and then go to our character backward. And we actually might, let's see, let's just see how this works first, because I think we might need to have two different options, or we might need a dummy state. But here we say our condition, character forward, condition if is flipped is true, then we're going to go to backward. And then the same thing here, condition if is flipped is false, we're going to go back to forward. And we'll add a little duration on this, and we can play with these values and kind of see how everything works. So now when I play this and I flip, you can see it does this cool like Paper Mario flip, which you could take some time and actually create an animation where he's maybe taking a couple steps and pivoting and looking the other way. But now we can start, stop, we can flip, stop him. So that was something. Yeah, that's a little goofy there. And I think that is, not sure why that's happening. Let's take a look at this layer and see. Flip. Oh, interesting. Flip. Okay, we'll stop it. Yeah, so there's something going on here. So we're actually going forward and then going here. And I think it's because we need to set some conditions here. Is playing is true. And maybe we need to say is flipped is false. Is flipped is false here. And that might fix it. There we go. Okay. Yep. So what's happening is because I wasn't checking to see if is flipped was true or not, it was bouncing to forward and then to backward. So if that makes sense or doesn't make sense, let me know. So yeah, that's the basic. I mean, basically, that's kind of how you would set this up. I got our character walking, flipping. And then we have one more piece that we want to add to this. Whoops. So we've got our background, our character, and then we want to add this tree in front. And I've already got it timed correctly. But generally, items that are in the foreground are going to move a little faster. I believe that's the way it works. So we're going to tree as another nested artboard. We're going to select our tree and then align it here, and we'll drop it behind our noise. And then we're just going to add our animations into our forward, pause, and backward timelines here. So it'll match our background. So we can go into our tree. We can say for background forward, we want to add our lumberjack. Oop, that's actually I hadn't renamed it, but that's the tree animation. We'll do simple again. And then we're just going to say key is playing and set the speed to 1. For pause, we're going to do the same thing, except we're going to key it to 0 and then key the, we'll just say it's not playing for this one. And did I do that? Maybe we'll keep it playing. That's something that I don't think will have an effect on it, but let's look at our background. So we didn't actually key that here. Interesting. I don't think it'll have much of an impact, but we can find out. Okay, and now for our backward, we're going to set this speed to -1 and then key this to playing. So let me go ahead and play this. And we start walking. You can see that tree is going to pass. And then when we reverse, we can go back and check out the tree, right? We can hide behind the tree. Take a look. Yep. So yeah, the cool thing is once you get the speed or the direction set up, you can add other elements to it, like another layer of parallax. Could add another person walking by, or another object in the scene that you want to add to your scene. So yeah, that's kind of the basics and kind of how I went about setting this up initially. Um, I think we should take this and we're going to say this is our entry example. And then we're going to duplicate this and we're going to try the any state example just to see if there's an easier way to do this. And this totally could be an easier way to do it. But luckily, we've got all the animations I think that we'll need. And what we're going to do is we'll just disconnect all of this. And for this, we're actually going to use, I believe we'll want to use a number input in this one. So let's grab our any state and let's kind of organize this where we'll start with our pause and then we'll go backward and forward. Okay. So let's add a number and we'll call this direction. And we will start, maybe we'll start like paused is 0. So if our direction equals 0, we'll be paused. If our direction equals a -1, we'll go backwards. And if our direction is a +1, we'll go forward. So this should, in theory, work, right? So we'll go up, pause, back. Okay, no problem there. Works actually really well. I'll show you what happens, what the issue I was having, and it might not have been an issue. I had just already set it up the other way. Is if we add our duration here, and when I play this, so that's the only thing, right? So it's transitioning to that pause. So we could, maybe we have like an entry state that doesn't have any transition, or we just remove it from here and see what happens. Okay. So the only thing that's like, I guess the reason I would maybe not do it this way, unless we can find a solution, is that now you don't have any duration between your background, your pause, and your forward. But it is super simple to set up. And I think what we could do is default. So we could add, I think we could just add like a blank state here. And we could say, we could make a dummy condition. So let's say like if direction is, we'll just say like -2. So we can start at -2. We'll add our duration back here. Okay, maybe not. Maybe we'd have to add another pause. Anyway, I'm not going to worry about it. This seems to work pretty well. I am going to worry about it because now I'm curious. I wonder if we just add another pause. Let's just add another pause here with no duration on it. And that'll be our condition. Direction is -2. So now we can start our number input at -2. And we shouldn't get the weird slide. Then we can go to 1, 0, -1. And then we never have to go back to that -2. Hey, that works pretty well. So yes, you can absolutely do this within any state. we do the same thing for our character here. The only thing is you don't get the benefit of that using that is flip Boolean, because you're relying on that number input. But then I think we could do the same thing here, is we could just say, oh, yeah. So we'd need a character forward, a character backward, and then a character pause. Hmm. Got to think. Yeah, this is interesting because now we don't have the ability to flip the character. Hmm. Let me think about this. So basically, we want, okay, let's say our character is forward. So we know that that would be our, right? If our condition equals, our direction equals 1, we know that for backward, our condition needs to equal direction is -1, right? So we know that. We'll add a little of this, and let's go ahead and see what happens. Okay, so we'll set this to 0, and then we'll go 1. And now I know what it is. So now if we go -1, okay, it does work. Perfect. 0, 1. All right. I think this will do it. That's all we need. So then if we go 0, 1, you know what? I think we got it. So you can do this with any states, and it works pretty well. And I think the state machine is not quite as confusing as if you use this. So I think there's some things that you have to do here that you don't have to do here, and it just makes a little more sense in terms of using a number to drive those. So anyway, they're both viable solutions, but I would probably, I guess, just for simplicity's sake, maybe using the any state is what I would try and do. I'm guessing that the any state version makes more sense. Anybody have any feedback on that? Um, Hold on just a second. All right, sorry about that. Since you're keying the speed of the nested animations, you could also use a blend state to transition between the speeds too. Yeah, so you could do I mean, let's do that example too. So you're saying you could essentially make him go as fast as you want or as slow as you want. Yeah, the thing is, I think the character you couldn't utilize the character's state machine. I think at that point you would have to set him up in using the animations, I believe. Um, right? Because I don't think there's a way to set the playback speed of a state machine, if that makes sense. Something I could definitely play with. But yeah, I think it would be tricky if you weren't just pulling in each one of those as an animation, which you could do. I mean, you could pull in the walk cycle, pull in the the idle and set it up that way. Or I wonder if you could. Yeah, I think it would be tricky. I think you'd have to use a remap, and not necessarily a remap, but you'd have to use a nested animation to control the speed, because we don't have a way to just directly control the speed and key it on a timeline if it's not a nested artboard. So yeah, I think that is what I'm gonna call this probably. I think this is a good. There's actually a video I've been working on that addresses this, and I might actually go back and revisit and just do the any state version, because I think it's a bit faster to get up and running, and I think it just makes there's less confusion. So I might actually revisit that video, and hopefully get it out. It'll just be a quick little tutorial. But yeah, that's the lumberjack. So the next thing I wanted to take a look at is just a few things from this Mega Man HUD project I've been working on. And I just wanted to go over kind of how some of the stuff is set up. I know that we've talked about solos and PNG sequences or image sequences, and how you can use things that are rendered from, let's say, a 3D, like Blender, or, uh, Cinema 4D, or even a Procreate animation or something like that. And you can take that, and if you can render it as an image sequence, you can then bring that into Rive and essentially make a flip book or a frame by frame animation using solos. So in this example, let me go ahead and just play. So you can see this, zoom in a little bit. You can see this rotating head, right? So it's a wireframe. I don't think I would be able to do that in 2D in Rive. So this is something that, because we don't have 3D support in the sense that our editor allows you to navigate in 3D space. You can use it, as we've kind of seen, with 3D and project these things onto 3D objects in game engines like Unity and hopefully Unreal soon. But if you wanted to do something like this, you would make a pre-rendered animation. So this one I just was able to create in Blender. And then if we look at our assets panel, so I've got it, I ended up loading it into a PSD file. That I would recommend if you're working with a lot of images, which this is. You can kind of see, if we click through all of these PNGs, you got your head rotating. So yeah, basically this is just frame by frame of the head or helmet rotation. So we bring that PSD in, and I'll go ahead and just do this really quick. It's my fun little stylized Mega Man over here. Well, actually, we'll generate an artboard with it, and you can see we get kind of this crazy overlay thing going on here. And what this is showing us is just every layer, right? Which we don't necessarily want. So what you can do is select all of these, and then if you hit what is it, Command L, it's going to drop all of those into a solo group. And this way we can selectively toggle on and off each image in our animation. So if I go to animate mode here, I go to my timeline. An easy way to do this, and I say easy in the sense that it's the easiest way I found to do it, because we don't have a way to auto key all of these. But basically you would go to your start, and you'll need to like click on one and then click back on 0. And then using what's the caret, like left and right angle brackets. It's like comma and period on your keyboard. That will toggle you a frame like forward and a frame back. And here I can just move forward, click on 1, move forward, click on 2. So it's a little tedious, but once you get rolling, it's therapeutic. Maybe not at all, but it doesn't take too long to to get all these keyed, and I'm just clicking on the radial or the radio button for each frame, and we're getting close. You get to hear that nice click. I just got a new mechanical keyboard that is probably not streamer friendly. Okay. So now if we scrub through this, we've got a rotating head. Let's go ahead and set our background to black here so it looks kind of how it was intended. But now we can set this to loop, and we can adjust our work area or adjust the actual timeline length. But now you've got your looping head, and you can adjust the speed if you want here. Set this to 0.5. Or 0.25. And obviously it's not going to be, if you were to do this with a interpolated, like in between keyframes, you would actually, that would be smooth. But because it's essentially frame by frame, you're going to get kind of a lower frame rate the slower you make that, if that makes sense. But anyway, yeah, that's how you bring in an image sequence, and that's how I added the 3D aspect of this little boot logo, boot sequence. And I started adding some little glitchy effects here. But yeah, this is super fun. I love working on this stuff. And then we've got him over here too, just as kind of an idle animation. Trying to think if there's anything else in here that's worth going over. Does anybody have any thoughts or ideas on what they'd like to see? Again, I thought today would be fun. I normally will spend, half the time building something and designing something in Rive, which I love doing, but I thought this would be a good change it up a little bit and just do more of a deep dive into some projects. Oh, how'd you set up your text modifiers? That's right, because I shared something on Twitter about this up here in particular. And it's going to be fun because how did I set it up? Well, it's a lot of trial and error at this point for me, because modifiers are so interesting in the way they interact with each other. Once you start stacking modifiers. So I'll kind of go over what my thought process was, and how I kind of reached this particular little, it's just kind of a nice, automated, animation that you can change the text to whatever you want, and it'll utilize the modifier animation, and you don't have to key in individual opacity keys and stuff like that. So if we'll look at it in design mode here and try and just kind of go over my modifiers here. So I'm, have a modifier set up, and I'm going to affect the opacity. That's all I want to do. So I've got that set up, and then over here, I've adjusted the range, and I'm keying the range for a bit of it. But basically, I wanted the range to be tight as it animates on, and then widen as it finishes that whole animation loop. And then my offset, I've just kind of pulled it off to the side, and then I'm gonna roll it through here, right? And if we look at our range, I think I've add, so they're just set to add. So basically I'm revealing letters and then, individually, and then hiding them. So if we look at the actual animation, you can kind of see what's going on is that they end up crossing each other. So if we look at our offset, so here we've got, let's see, this is our range 1. So if we go to our range 1, let's actually name this. I think this is our right. I'll say right side. Right. And we'll name this one left. And you kind of see, okay, so we'll start with our offset. So we're just going from negative, was like negative 50% all the way to a positive. So we're just running through that. And then for our range, I've got it set to 33%, and then it ramps back down to 0. So our range kind of starts narrow and then expands as I want all the letters to pop on. This actually, I don't think I can toggle the opacity off there, but we've got a couple things going because I'm also keying the opacity of everything too. So for our left range, kind of the same thing. Whoops, it's pretty finicky. Oh, interesting. Okay, so those aren't necessarily named correctly. So this one's moving from right to left. This one's from left to right. That makes more sense. So we're crossing. This one is actually this one. It's going from left to right. Come back here. So it's narrow, a narrow range, and then it starts expanding to reveal all the letters. So that's it. Like it's just overlapping opacity modifiers. And again, like I'm not, like I said, it's a lot of trial and error with modifiers for me right now, just because I know there's like an effect I want to do, right? And I think I can use text modifiers to do it. And then it's just going in and playing with, ranges, and you can start messing with the modes. The interpolation is going to play a big factor in how it, how quickly it starts and stops. Fall off is a great one for kind of smoother animations, but in this case I kind of wanted it's either kind of more binary off or on, right? Like either it's the lights off or the lights on. So yeah, that's how I set up that one. I'm doing something pretty similar with this down here. And let's see if I can find our weapon transition. And this one, I'm doing the same thing with opacity. I've just got like 3 different ranges that are just overlapping. And I believe on this one, I'm actually using, difference. So the mode is difference. And so I'm not going to, again, I at this point, I just kind of play with stuff until it gives me the effect I want. But basically, I believe what this one will do is it'll give you so if it's what's the difference? Like, I think it'll just knock out what's underneath it. Again, I'm not totally clear on what all these do. Like add and subtract, I get, multiply, I get. But I'm still still playing with this feature. It's just, again, it's such a powerful feature. I just need to spend some more time with it and really get to know, like, in what scenario would you use add or subtract or, min max or difference. So yeah, I agree. Okay, Jeff, yeah, I did have that. So kind of my initial thought is I want like a hit or miss animation. So you think about like text kind of randomly blinking on. I wanted something like that I could kind of automate and then use a different, text run value to kind of make it so I didn't have, like I said, I don't have to go and set up each individual letter as a range and then key the opacity for each one manually, which you could do if you're looking for a very specific thing. But I kind of wanted a way to like automate this, and I can take those modifiers and I can copy them onto another piece of text and reuse it, which I think is really nice, being able to do that. Rara. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it is a lot of trial and error. There's some things that are very straightforward. I think once you start adding more ranges than one is when it can get a little hard to understand like what's going to happen. So yeah, I think at this point it's just kind of play with it and see where it gets you. And I think text modifiers is one of those things that we've addressed and have talked about. Um, when we launched text modifiers came with it. But I think it's something that's worth a deep dive and for us to kind of go through and figure out what the best way to use I shouldn't say the best way, but what some practical ways to use those modifiers are, and then go from there. And but yeah, I agree. At this point, a lot of it is kind of trial and error, um, and just kind of testing stuff out and seeing if it works, and then tweaking those uh, values to see what you get. So yeah, that's again, generally, like I do kind of have an idea of what text effect I want, but sometimes happy accidents will occur and just like, oh no, that works. Like I'm done messing with it. I'll keep it. And I'm saying all of this, not saying that the text modifiers are not set up correctly. I'm saying it more as I don't quite totally understand how things are calculated. So it's more of a user, you know, ignorance type thing. So yeah, I think that is something we could definitely take time and build a better library around the ways you can use them and kind of what different modes will how that will affect your animation and all that. Um, yeah, I'm trying to think if there's anything else I wanted to cover in this stream. Um, yeah, so what we covered nested inputs, we covered some playback stuff with nested artboards. We covered PNG sequences and solos, bringing in some frame by frame animations and adding those to your Rive projects. And one thing to note about that is I would be careful on the usage of that. Like I would do what you can without like if it's an element that you need to show that's like I've got this 3D object that I'm rotating that I want to, you know, I want to bring into Rive. Like I would just be cautious of the file size because that is going to take a bit to load up front. And so just one thing to keep in mind is I would keep them lightweight. You can always go in and adjust the compression on these. So I think in general, when you bring a PNG in a PSD, it'll go ahead and convert all of those images into WebP. And you can then go and like compress it more if you want. I don't really want to do that right now, but if it's a file size issue, you can go in and compress it, see if it looks okay. I'm going to add myself back to the conversation here. Excuse me. See if it looks okay, and then go from there because that's going to help. That's going to help with the weight of your Riv file because all of that stuff will be exported. But having just said that, we do have this new option to, do a referenced file, which will basically package. I believe it doesn't actually include it in your Riv. It'll kind of keep it. You can keep it separate, so you can load all those images, but they're just not embedded directly in your Riv file. So file size will go down. So yeah, that's all other stuff that I believe Gordon kind of went over that a few weeks ago, talking about embedded versus referenced versus hosted images. And yeah, that's kind of where I'm at today. Still kind of getting back to the swing of things after a nice break over Thanksgiving here in the US, and hoping to knock some cool stuff out throughout the month of December. Again, if you guys have any questions or anything that's been a you kind of run up against that you're like, I'm having an issue with this, like there's stuff that's blocking me, or I need to know a little bit more about this feature, or how would you implement this or do this here. Make sure you drop a line in Discord, and or bring it to our live streams on Tuesdays, and just ask, because we're all willing and able to answer those questions or direct you to the person that can answer those questions for you. So yeah, I hope everybody's enjoying the holiday season, and I'm getting pumped for everything that is December, and one of my favorite times of the year. So yeah, I'll hang out for another 5 minutes or so. And if you have any more questions, let me know. I'm just gonna maybe I'll just go over some more of the stuff that I'm working on with this file. So one thing that I just started adding this morning is this kind of glitchy effect. So I'm still playing with it. It's not perfect, but I was like, how can I make it, add this glitch effect without having to do too much? And if we hide this, you can see I have this blink loop. Okay. And I duplicated our turnaround. So I duplicated all of this solo, dropped in another group. So I've got another copy of it, and I just duplicated it while I was in our visor loop. So that just copies all those keys for me when you duplicate it in animate mode. And then I added this shape here. So I've got a shape, and then I've got a bunch of paths, and I'm just clipping this turnaround to the shape. And so if I were to hide this one and then hide the fill, you can see I've just got some clipped pieces. We'll show this again. And then we go to our glitch timeline, and that group, we'll rename this glitch group. And I'm just scaling, like using some hold keyframes. I'm just scaling it to kind of like push it out real quick. I think it's kind of a glitchy effect. I like it where it's a little faster there, but maybe we just adjust this. Maybe we can take this one out. Yeah. Anyway, so that's all it's doing. And the reason I have these paths that are different sizes is I'm just kind of taking different sized chunks out of it, if that makes sense, and then scaling that. So I don't want them all to be the same length and the same height. So anyway, yeah, just kind of a fun little way to add little fun details. And then my other thought is to duplicate this again and then like move chunks of it off so it kind of glitches into a different location. Might play with that a little bit more. But these are all things that, I really haven't messed around with this type of style or animation much. Kind of got super inspired by Jerry Liu coming on board and all of the amazing work that he's been doing for us, and in the past prior to Rive. So very, very much inspired by the stuff that Jerry's doing. If you have time, I'd love to see the walk cycle on the lumberjack. Yeah, we can look at it. If I can remember how I put it together. Let's see. We'll just go to which walk cycle am I using? Walk. Boom. This one. Okay. So this was early on. So this is one of the first characters I think I brought into and made in Rive and animated. And so he's pretty simple when it comes to his rig. His arms. So we've got a torso with everything in it. We've got, everything's just kind of parented I don't think I need this. This was for a fun experiment that I removed. But anyway, so everything's kind of parented under this torso, and then his legs are just um, IK constraints. So that makes it pretty easy to animate his legs. So when he moves up and down, his legs bend. I don't know. I think we've gone over IK constraints before, but if you have questions, I can find some resources to show you that. But then for his walk cycle, like, so I generally start with the torso, and I'll just kind of get the up and down movement. It's hard to see this because everything's moving, but generally what I'll do is I'll get him moving up and down. So imagine we're here. I'm just getting this Y movement, like bobbing up and down, right? And it depends. Like I say that, but oftentimes you can start with the legs, just start animating the legs. But with these IK constraints, all I'm doing is I'm kind of looking for when his foot's on the ground and it's dragging back. So I'm looking at this one in particular. Foot's on the ground, dragging back, and then I start to move it up in the Y axis, and then it comes back down to step, and then it loops here. So basically that movement, I'm just copying. If we look at the position here, I'm just copying that to the back leg as well. Not necessarily like key copying, but trying to recreate that same movement for him on his back leg. And so I'll animate everything kind of synced up. So his arms would be swinging at the same rate. His head would be moving at the same rate. And then I'll extend my timeline. I think Robert's gone over this a few times. JC's done it. I'm sure everybody's done it. Showed it at one point. But basically, you would duplicate the stuff that you want to offset, duplicate keys, and then you can start dragging them and offsetting them. So if we look at like his head, so you can see his head position is offset from the torso, right? So our torso position is kind of on these 30, 45, and then a second. So every 15 frames. And then the head is just offset from that so that it kind of moves at a little different rate. That's really what I found the key is just offsetting all those movements. And this isn't perfect by any means. Like I have a long way to go when it comes to perfecting a walk cycle, but this is what I found is like if you can get all of the movements in sync, then you just play with offsetting and you can get different effects. Like you can get different styles of walking. Styles of walking and limps and all that. Would you recommend using follow path for the IK targets for the legs? Ooh, you could. I feel like the only thing, if you use follow path, I guess you could just adjust the path itself. That's something I haven't tried, but you're right. It would help you get, there's a curve that you kind of want to try and achieve. And that would make it, being able to visualize that curve too by keeping the stroke on. Yeah, it's something I would love to try. I mean, I think ideally what you do is at some point, the plan is to allow you to on stage manipulate like the X and Y, like the curves. So when, we've got our motion paths. I'm not sure why it's not. Oh, I got to click on here. So you can see that this is struggling pretty hard with the fact that there's no curve here. So I'm really like, I mean, this is not ideal, right? Ideally, there'd be a nice arc and it would be flowing up and around and back. So hopefully at some point we get handles on all of these. You can actually use like a Bezier curve and manipulate the curves here and make a more fluid movement. Because I think you kind of almost want, like there's a lot of figure eights that happen, like especially with the arm movement, like the torso movement. You want a nice figure eight that's kind of, dipping and arcing like that. So yeah, um, that would make it easier. And you could try. I mean, I definitely would try follow path and see if that helps you kind of achieve that fluid movement. I think then you'd have to think about the timing across that 0 to 100%, because you're keying essentially the distance across that path. So worth checking out. I haven't tried it yet, but I think it's something that would be cool to play with. But yeah, ideally you'd be able to manipulate the curve, the motion path right on the stage. So all right. Well, I think I'm going to call it. I appreciate everybody for hanging out. Let me know if this format was interesting, or if I like I said, I like building stuff live. So maybe next time I'll just jump into making something and seeing what I can get done in an hour. But I thought this way, it's stuff that I've worked a little bit longer on. I could kind of show off some of the techniques. And again, I appreciate Jeff for pushing me to to do the any state on this one, because I think it's something I saw Mr. Beardo did. I think his name's Chris Etling. I, I'm calling him Mr. Beardo, but um, he when I shared this example, he was like, "Oh, are you using any state?" And he went on to set it up using an any state, and I was like, "Oh, yeah, I should try that." And I tried it, and I ran into that duration issue, which apparently I just didn't press hard enough. Um, I had it set up how it was working fine. I'm like, you know what? Let's go back, and I'm glad you kind of pushed me to re-examine the any state solution, because I think it's a pretty good solution. Um, so yeah, that's that. Um, I'm going to call it a stream, and we will see you next week. I think on Tuesday. I don't think we have anything going on. No workshop scheduled for tomorrow. So we'll keep everybody up to date on when all that's going to happen. Again, we'll have our Tuesday live stream and then creative session next week. Maybe you get JC. I'm not sure. Don't quote me on that. Um, I'm not sure who's next. And yeah, we'll see y'all next week. And we'll definitely see y'all on Discord and Twitter/X and all that. So have a great rest of your week. Thanks for hanging out.